Um,
Cool.
the initial question is, do you remember when you first thought about traveling?
I think kind of. I
Okay.
remember when I was 14 and I hated flying. I don't
Okay.
remember why, but I just hated flying. But I remember I went on a missions trip with my church
Yep.
and we went to Chile for 2 weeks. And after we went on that trip, I was like, oh my gosh, I love traveling. I don't know why I hated flying before. Like, I absolutely fell in love with like discovering other cultures
Yep.
and like experiencing something different. And my fear for like traveling went out the door once I actually experienced it at an older age.
Okay. Kels?
Um, well, I was just thinking when I read your questions that it's kind of interesting that you asked me because it's like how I grew up. So
Yeah.
I was like, of my life, I never thought like people didn't travel because
Yep.
I think it was like normal, like at least like moving to a different place. So I think, what is it, like by the time I was 6, that was like our 4th like place that we had moved or so,
Oh,
or
yeah,
like
yeah.
4th or 5th. And then we lived there for a while, and when I moved from like Hawaii to Japan, again it was like, oh, this is just like how life is, and it was more like exciting, like, oh, we're going to another place. So I think living, like growing up with that, it was more like inbuilt, like I need to go see other places, like I need to experience this, and been like really appreciative of like, I guess when people like, even Melissa, how you're saying like I was afraid to fly, like it's never occurred to me. Like every now and then when I'm on a flight, I'm like, what if this plane crashes? Like, but it never, like, it's more like a comforting, like you have your little seat and they're going to bring you food and you just kind of get settled in, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to watch the movies and arrive to a new place. But it's always been this weird, like you go to different places and I have to like tell myself like I'm in a different country right now, like
Yeah.
this is, it kind of feels like is this really real,
Yeah.
or I don't
So
know.
traveling was never scary. It was always exciting for you?
Yeah, the only time I feel like I've been kind of like thrown off, I think because I grew up mostly in like predominantly like Asian culture kind
Yeah.
of places, and that's where I traveled to a lot. But actually in 2017 when I came to Europe was probably the more like culture shock that I felt, like being there for longer, and like feeling like I don't know how culture works here. Like, do I get in line this way, or like do I do this, or looking more like I fit in as well. I found really overwhelming because people would come up and just like speak German to me, and I'm like, I feel so ignorant that I don't know another language. But it's like obvious, like in a lot of Asian cultures, that I wouldn't speak the language, or I stand out like so obnoxiously.
Yeah.
I think like I think I was more comfortable like traveling there because there's like a sense of like familiarity. So I
Yeah.
think stepping out of that was kind of like, oh wow. But yeah,
Definitely.
I don't
And Melissa, like you grew up on an island, so you traveled a bunch or you stayed on your island until?
Um, so when I was like 6, that was the first time I went on like a missions trip with my
Yeah.
parents. But I mean, we would travel from island to island, but I think like going long distances, I just didn't want to sit on an airplane. I think that was the thing. It wasn't I was like so afraid of it. All I could think of was that would be so boring, like
Yeah.
to sit on an airplane for like 10 hours. Like that
Yeah.
sounds awful. Like that's like what came to my brain. It wasn't like I was like, oh my gosh, I'm scared that the plane's gonna crash, because we would, if I wanted to see my family, they lived in California. So if we
Yeah.
wanted to see them, we had to take a 5-hour plane ride to go to California. But the thing is, like, in my brain, I'm like, that's so boring. I can't like, because it wasn't like California's not like, whoa, this is a totally new culture, totally different. It's just like kind of like, oh, like it's just California. But then when I actually got to experience like a different culture, that's when I
Yeah.
was like, oh wow, like this is cool. Like this is why people will go on long airplane rides.
Yeah.
Because to me, when I was younger, a 5-hour airplane ride, it was like, this is forever just to go to California. Like it
Yeah.
felt so boring to be on an airplane. So we did travel, but not as much as Kelcie, but
Okay. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
just traveled like in the islands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up traveling a bunch because dad just had us all over the country, but we never left the country. And so I was all about road trips, which can be boring and long, but it's quite interesting. So then when I took my first plane ride to New Zealand on tour, it was just like, oh, this is the best. Like, I love all the little things. I love the screen. And so anytime I took a flight after that, I loved it. But I was just never interested in traveling outside of Australia much. Like, I remember being like, no, I can stay in Canberra for the rest of my life. And then as soon as I went to Thailand the first time, I was like, no, I think I want to do this a lot more. And now traveling is so fun. What did you think would come from traveling before you started doing it a lot? Like, both of you have traveled a bunch, but until you entered a sphere that you traveled quite a lot, what did you think would come from doing it?
I guess just like exposure to like other cultures, kind of like seeing that people do things differently, and you're like, oh, I've never thought of doing it like that, or I didn't grow up doing it that way, but like that works just as well.
Yeah.
Or like you're like, oh, cool.
No.
So I think just like maybe now only like reflecting on some of that now is just, and not like out of an intention, like I really want to like appreciate other cultures or like be more like loving and kind. But I think that's been like a result of traveling, is just like being more appreciative and like welcoming of people and from different backgrounds, and not so much being like, oh, that like I would never do that, or that's disgusting, or like I don't want that food, or all those things, because to some people like that's like really special to them. So just like learning to like honor people more.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome.
I think for me, I agree with all that, but I think for me initially it's like the newness, because you can get really caught up in like a routine.
Yeah.
And it can be like, even right now that I haven't been in missions for like 6 years, I've realized that now, because when I was in missions, it was like you would never be afraid to travel. You would never like, it's hard to get caught up in a same routine when you're in missions, because there's always something new, which is what I loved about it. That's what I loved so much about it. And I think that's the thing with traveling now, especially now that I'm like outside of missions again, is like the newness again, because it's really easy in life to get caught up in your routine, caught up in, okay, this is my daily life. I wake up in the morning, I take a shower, I go to work, I come home, I make dinner, I go to bed, and repeat. It's just like the same repeated cycle, repeated cycle, repeated cycle, repeated cycle. So it's like, and then now I've experienced, again, being outside of missions, I've experienced when I'm going to travel, I'm almost like a fear comes over me, because I'm scared to get outside of my routine, because I've been so stuck inside of my routine that I'm like, okay, I want to travel, but I don't, because then I'm going to be outside of my normal, like what I'm doing every single day and my routine every single day of like the things I do. But I know that once I get there, I'll be so happy. Like, I think the thing for me is like the newness, the happiness, the joy. And when you travel and you're not like working or whatever, like you are able to live so much more in the moment than when you're in your every single daily routine. And I think that's what I love about traveling too, and the excitement of being able to just live in the moment and like experience those experiences, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But in the midst of all the newness and all the outside of regularity, would you have like a system in place or things that you would do whilst traveling so there was like a feeling of normalcy? Or you would just like jump into the weird difference?
I think I just kind of, when it, it's funny because sometimes I get jealous of my friends because they're so good at planning trips. Like they'll be like, oh yeah, we did this and we saw this and we went to this gallery and we did this. And I'm like, oh, like I just kind of like hung out with people in that culture and we just like did life. Like I just somehow, like for me, when I travel places, like I think because I just enjoy being with people and hanging out with people and knowing people, to me, I like the people I'm experiencing travel with rather than just like getting all these things done and seeing this and seeing that. Like some people are really into that and I get like, how do you plan all that? Like that overwhelms me. Like, I don't know how you plan this whole trip. Like that sounds freaking awesome. I wish I was traveling with you so I could experience that. But like that to me is like I don't know, maybe it's just not my personality. I don't like plan out all these things. I just, for example, me and Sunup went to India this last year, like in November, and we went for like 3 weeks to go see his family. And I always tell people the one thing that I got out of the trip more than anything was just living in the moment every day. It wasn't like, oh, I have to wake up and do this routine. It's like, oh, I wake up, go in the kitchen, go hang out with his mom, have a cup of tea, just chill, maybe help her with breakfast, like just kind of like relaxing in the moment and embracing whoever's around me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. How about you, Kel? Do you have like normal things when you travel just to make it more comfortable, or you're cool with just chilling?
Yeah, I think because then like, I guess like comparing a bit, like a lot of people like Melissa was saying, either like traveling, like they're like, I want to go here, I want to see this place, like Paris, I want to see the Eiffel Tower, I want to do this, I want to like go to the museum. And I think more like my travel is like based on like the people and like who lives there. And like, so even like when I came to Lithuania, like people are like, what did you go like see? What did you do? I'm like, well, you definitely walked around the city. We saw stuff. I was like, but mostly like we just sat inside, ate food, like watched Gilmore Girls. And then you're like, so like, did you see this or did you see that? So then I think just like, I more like, I think I like something that I realize I do is kind of like set up, like what makes it like hard to like leave places is like whatever I have, if you're like whatever like where you're staying, like your accommodation, I kind of like move in and I'm like, okay, here's my stuff, like here's like my like clothes, they're not just like in my suitcase, or they're like set up in like a way like however my room is or whatnot. And so then I'm like, okay, I like kind of lock in like now this is like my like home for the next whatever time. And so then I think the result though is I get a bit sad leaving. So I'm like, oh, I got like comfortable and I figured out like a flow here and now I have to leave again. I think that was like how I grew up, because I grew up like traveling. Something that I've noticed is I always wanted to like not travel, but also at the same time, like I'm like, oh, I just want to be settled somewhere. But like every couple years I get a bit like, okay, I haven't been anywhere. It's time to like shift. Like, so it's like a weird, like, I guess like contradictory type life where I'm like, I just want to settle down, but I'm also like, I can't not travel. Sorry. There's a window open. Might be really loud. Mayfield still has still rocking. It's still kind of loud sometimes.
Good
sometimes
old
people are yelling outside.
I was similar in that anytime we would go somewhere, I would make sure my bed was like comfortable and home, and then I'd make sure that I knew the surrounding streets. So I'd go for walks. So especially because I went to Cambodia multiple times, I would make sure my bed had like my own sheet and my own pillowcase and a book. And then I would go and walk around and we would get to know like there was a coffee store next to us. So we would always go there and blah, blah, blah. And then one year I had this competition with a guy called Brian from Wollongong who would stay in the most beds in a year. And it was like every 4 nights I slept in a different bed. Like I just wrote down what different beds I slept in during the year. And every 4 nights I was in a different bed. And I just got into the habit of like, all right, this is my home for tonight, or this is my home for the next week. And even here, now that I've moved into a place that I will actually stay for a while, I'm like, I don't need to decorate because I have this mindset of I'll just move on in a few days. But then my housemates are just like, no, we can actually decorate. Like we can actually buy things for this place. I'm like, no. So that's been an interesting journey. All right, and now 2 things. One, where's the furthest away from home you've been? And so then you have to define what home was at the time and then how far away from that place you went. And then one travel story that was just not enjoyable, but in hindsight was very enjoyable. And so while you
I thought you were going to say not enjoyable, but funny, because I have one of those.
Oh, you can get that one as well, or instead of. But as you think of those 2 stories, I'll tell my first one. So when my home was Newcastle, and I went away for my 5-month, like, I'm going to go away and learn things. South Africa, I was in Cape Town for 6 weeks. was the furthest away because it took such a roundabout way to get there. Like we just didn't fly straight over the water. It was like more complicated to get there. Whereas to get to London, which I went to the next time, was just 2 straight shot flights. And so I think Cape Town was the longest away, even though as the crow flies, it's not that far away. But now because my home is here, nothing is that far away. How about you?
Like geographically?
Yeah.
Like what? Because I feel like it'd have to be like Australia and America because my parents live on the East Coast. So it's like literally like the other side of the world. So it doesn't matter like if I'm there, it's like super far to get here. And if I'm here, then it's super far to get back there, which has made me like a lot more like, I guess, picky about like flights, like the route that you take, because like I would say I'm not gonna like settle for like the cheapest one if it has like 2 additional stops. Like I'm like, I only want to go from like Sydney to LA to like my final destination. Like I don't want to go like from Sydney to LA to Denver to Chicago to Washington DC. So I would pay like extra money so I don't have to take like any more flights than what I need to. But then coming back, I think it always feels like coming back from the States to Australia, you're like, yes, like I made it back. And then you've just traveled for over 20 hours. And then you're like, and I got to get on the train for 3 hours. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's like a little, like the train is like, you're just sitting there and it's like actually quite enjoyable. But like the thought of it and being like, I just want to be back already. Like I want to be closer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Not so fun.
I would say probably Synapse Village. It could be probably from Australia or even from America, because you have to take so many routes to get to his village because he doesn't have an airport where his village is. So I don't even remember the route we took when I was in Australia. I just remember there were all these crazy different flights. But from here, it's like, it depends if you fly to China or Qatar. So the first flight is either a 10-hour flight or a 15 or 16-hour flight. This last time it was like a 16-hour flight to Qatar, then another like 3 or 4 hour flight to Calcutta. Then you have to take another 2-hour flight to Dimapur. And then you have to take like a 2 to 3 hour taxi ride from Dimapur to Kohima, which is his village, which is literally in the middle of nowhere. And like the road to his village, they've been under construction for like, he said pretty much his whole life, and they're always saying, oh yeah, we're fixing the roads, but like they're so bad. Like you think like you know a bad road until you get to Kohima, and then you see these tiny cars and you're like, how are your tires not popping like on these roads? Because the roads are so bad. Like it's like 4-wheel driving, but think of 4-wheel driving and like a car that is not meant to 4-wheel drive. And you're driving in that and you're like, how are these cars not destroyed? So that would probably be my like furthest.
I was thinking, Jeremy, about when I joined your team in Uganda. And I flew like from the States to Amsterdam and then to where was it? What's the main city?
Oh, Kampala.
Yeah, but then like right before I flew there, you were like, hey, how are you getting to where we are? We're 2 hours away. And I was arriving at like 9 o'clock at night. And I was like, I was hoping you would tell me that. And so I like literally showed up and was like, oh my gosh, like I have no idea if Jeremy got my message, if there's going to be someone here. I have like,
and what happened?
You had sent like the pastor's like taxi driver.
Yes.
Basically, like I walked out and I like looked around and I didn't like, so I was like, okay, this is my plan. I'm gonna like look around and see if there's anyone like that kind of indicates like YWAM or something. If I don't, then I'm just like, I saw some other like girls like kind of around my age. I was like, I'll just tell them like my friend was supposed to pick me up, but I can't, like they're not here. like kind of asked them like, where are you staying for the night? Like, can I stay wherever you're staying? Because when I arrived as well, like the power went out in the whole airport, and the lady like used her like mobile phone to like look at my passport, and I was like, what is going on? This is wild. And I didn't tell many people because I didn't want people to be worried that I didn't fully have a plan of how to get to where you were. So then I didn't see anyone, and I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? And I was like, well, I need to get money out from the ATM. So I'll go and do that. And then I was like, I'll like just sit back down and kind of try to figure out and like see if there's anyone that comes. And then I was like, I'll walk around one more time. It's not a very big place. So I like walked around and I saw this guy holding a sign that said YWAM Kelly. And I was like, that's gotta be I'm like, definitely not my name, but it's close enough to my name. So I went up to him and I asked him, like, I was like, oh hi, like I'm with YWAM, like, and I asked him all these questions, like, do you know like Jeremy? Like he has like red hair and like beard and like a really long like rat's tail. And I was just trying to like vet like, is this like legit, or am I just like getting into like a taxi with like a complete stranger in Uganda at like 10 o'clock at night to drive 2 hours away somewhere? And it was just like pretty much praying the whole time. It's like, I hope. And then we ended up like at the house and you came out and I was like, yay, I made it. So maybe that's one of my like worst travel but like turned out really good kind of experiences. That's a little iffy. I'm like, ugh.
Were we already in that big white house?
Yeah. Like the one that had like no furniture.
But it was so expensive and the water kept cutting out and the power kept cutting out.
Oh my
and
God.
I got so sick that I pooped myself.
And there was a chicken in the kitchen. And then like fish in the cupboard, and then the chicken just disappeared one day, and that night we were eating it.
That was a weird time.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe the goat farm as well.
Oh man. So mine doesn't have a happy ending, really.
Oh, that's fine. But mine either, but please.
So it was actually on my DTS, and we were coming back from India and Nepal. And in Nepal, that was the last location we had been at, and we had only been eating like 2 meals a day. Yeah. So like they only have it at breakfast and dinner. And the other thing is, the place that we stayed at, I think they might have been a more like poor family because we were in a remote village that was far from everything, and it literally was the same exact curry and dal every single day, except for it was a different meat. So because it was the same thing every day, I kept eating less and less and less. So when we were flying back, we flew through India. We stayed with the family. They gave us a huge Indian dinner. Then like at the airport, we ate like McDonald's and we ate all this food. And so we're eating all this stuff after we haven't eaten like pretty much anything for like 2 weeks. And, you know, I get on the airplane and I kind of feel like crappy, but I still eat some of the airplane food. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I should eat anything else. We're coming back. I get on the train from Sydney to Newcastle, and I'm sitting next to Natalie, and I'm like, I don't feel good. Like, I really don't feel good. Like, I think I'm gonna throw up. I seriously think I'm gonna throw up. So she gives me a plastic bag, and I'm sitting there, and I'm on the train, and I just start throwing up in the plastic bag on the train back from Sydney to Newcastle. And the worst part is, it's not just our team in this train. It's like during the daytime. So there's other people in the train, and I'm throwing up in this bag, and I see this mom and son just get up and leave, like walk out of the train because I'm like throwing up in this bag. And then it gets worse. Then I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I have to go to the bathroom. So I go in the bathroom and I have like diarrhea. I have like this diarrhea happening while I'm trying to throw up. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing I've ever experienced. And then, so what I do is, you know how there's like the little hallway before you go back in, like right next to the bathroom in the train? I just lay down there. I'm like, I'm just gonna lay down here. I'm just gonna sleep here until like we get to like Newcastle, because I need to be right next to the bathroom. And like the train guy's coming through, he's like, is everything all right here? I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, I just need to be by the bathroom. I'm throwing up and pooping. Like, I have to be near the bathroom. That was probably like the worst experience of my life and most embarrassing, because people started leaving the train while I was throwing up in a plastic bag.
It is
That's
hilarious
wild.
to me how comfortable people get with bodily functions while they're on outreach. Or just
Yeah, like in
My team
Cambodia,
was okay. It was just the people that had no idea who we were.
when I'm like, hey Jeremy, like how's it going? How are you? When we were in Cambodia and you're like, I've been pooping rice for days. And I'm like, you must just be exaggerating, like surely not. And then when we moved to Battambang, Ellie and I, like for a couple nights, it was like we were taking turns like getting up, going to the bathroom, and legit like I like Googled, like I was like, oh my gosh, I think something's wrong. It literally was like a pile of rice in the toilet.
Why is it so weird?
And I was like, Jeremy was right. I know what he's talking about now.
No, that's, yeah. Wild times.
Wait, I have one good story. I'll try to make it really quick.
Yes, please.
So it was another outreach. It was another one for my DTS. It was when we were in India, and it was Danny and Natalie who was leading our team. And that India outreach was so random, because like the pastor like just had us doing something different every day. It wasn't like we were focused on one outreach thing. It was like every day it was like, okay, now you're going to go to these orphans. Now you're going to go to these lepers. Now you're going to go do this. It was just random. Okay. So then he was like, oh yeah, like Natalie and Danny tried to get it set up where we would go spend time with these people that have like mental disabilities. So we ended up like spending the night like in this like, I don't even remember. It was like maybe a preschool. I don't know. It was connected to the mental facility, but it wasn't like a place to sleep. It was like a preschool or something. So we have our sleeping bag set up. And before we arrived there, like, of course, people are looking at us weird because we're these white people walking over there. And so in my brain, I'm like, people are going to attack us tonight. Like, we're the white people that's staying in some random preschool, like, thing. Anyways, in the middle of the night, we're all laying down, we're all sleeping, and we just hear, it's like literally 12 o'clock at night, we hear bang, 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 bang. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what is happening? Like somebody's literally gonna come in here and break in. And I'm like, Natalie, do you hear that? Do you hear that, Natalie? And like Natalie's trying to wake up Danny, like, Danny, go check it out. Cause like, you know, he's the guy on the outreach team, even though it's Danny, but you know. So he goes to check it out. And it was just the guy upstairs asking if we wanted some water. So it turned out good because nobody broke in on us. He just wanted to know if we wanted some water. Anyways. Yep.
All right. Good discussion club part 1. Thanks for coming, you guys.
No was.
I wonder if it worked.